you want to make sure that you're giving just enough to make sure that you're refining the processes, that the AI fellow is doing exactly what it needs to do, just like you would do with a normal hire, right? Except that they're 24/7, they're never tired, they're running multiple conversations with multiple people, and they have immediate access to do tasks that, somebody would have taken hours to do.
Welcome to Henderson HQ. This is the podcast where you get all the stories behind the businesses that make our community tick. Don't forget to subscribe to our weekly newsletter. Hey, Henderson HQ, it's Scott Groves with the Henderson HQ newsletter website, all the media stuff. Thanks for watching the podcast. We're here with my new friend today, Taylor Dondich, who's going to talk about all things AI, building your business with AI, all of the stuff you can and cannot do. And it's interesting because working in the business space, I know that AI has become the new area of snake oil salesmen. Like years ago, it was people doing Facebook ads or running media companies or what have you. And if I told you the amount of money that I've spent trying to generate leads in my business through paying some of these agencies that didn't work, it would probably blow your mind. So I'm excited to jump in with somebody who's been native to this space and this language for a long time. Whether you're a business owner or you're just looking for kind of more information on how AI can affect your local ecosystem, stick around. Taylor, let's go, man. Tell me about your background and why I should trust what you're saying about AI and computers versus the 22-year-old life coach that wants to sell me an AI trader program on Instagram.
Bro, who's like, AI is the future. Put all your dollars into it. I'm just older. I think that's like my number one qualification, right? 20 plus years of experience in technology, using machine learning and AI before ChatGPT even hit the field, knowing what works, what doesn't from, a technology perspective. So, I've worked in technology 20 plus years as a frontline engineer, software engineer, slowly building myself up into tech leadership roles, VP of engineering, CTO. I've worked with some fantastic companies who have applied machine learning and AI in very successful ways. I've seen other businesses apply it in ways that were catastrophic. And we could totally dive into that, but the scene is always changing now at a rapid neck-breaking pace. And if somebody's trying to tell you they have the golden ticket on AI and how to apply it correctly, they're going to be wrong the very next day. That's how quickly the pacing is changing. And people are using it in ways that can actually be detrimental to their business.
Right.
If you don't know how to apply it correctly, you might be having data breach under your nose. You've got a lot of these personal AI assistants that people, whether you're a solo entrepreneur or a tech crazed CEO saying, we're going to apply this right away without doing any proper due diligence, like you would use with any technology, right? Whether it was AI or anything else. And then all of a sudden it hasn't gone through all the security audits and stuff like that. We've seen that with law firms where, you've had data breaches there. You've seen people with like AI costs spinning out of control, and they didn't really recognize and understand like the impact. You've also got the cultural impact, right? If you've got a team that's not ready to adopt AI, you've got people shoving it down their throats and people don't know how to use it effectively, and you're getting kind of poor quality output. Like it's a crazy landscape right now that
Right.
we're in. The important thing to like really recognize though is that this is a tool, and these tools have been around for decades. Machine learning has been around for decades. We've had Amazon suggestion engines suggesting products, and we've had tools to find cheaper flights and things like that. All of this stuff that you would be asking an AI assistant to do, we've had this technology forever. But with the introduction of large language models, that's where the game has kind of changed, because now you're talking to a machine in like your own language. And because of that, you feel like there's this realm of intelligence that you're working with. But to be honest, these are just another tool that we've kind of had in our bat belts for a while now.
Yeah, the way it's been described to me, because I am not a tech guy, is like AI, the large language models, is basically kind of like almost like spell correct. You're typing a word, it suggests what the rest of the word is going to be. This is just doing that at scale. So it's like it's kind of guessing what I want or what I'm going to type next, and then it's giving me, instead of a one-word answer, it's giving me a 1 page or 1 terabyte answer.
That is the most simplistic way of putting it. Like, you hope that it's like the best romantic partner that can finish your sentences, right? But it's still kind of like a guessing system right now. Of course, it's a much more intelligent guessing system because it's backed off of all the data that large language model has been trained on, right? And you use different large language models depending on like what kind of scope you're in. You have your general purpose large language models like OpenAI, ChatGPT, Anthropic, Claude, and things like that. And you have very specialized models that might be in the scientific realm, medical realm, maybe doing voice analysis, things like that. But it's all based off of the data that they've been trained on. And so when you're looking at like OpenAI and Anthropic Claude, they've been trained on tons of human language content. And that's how it has a better idea of kind of guessing your intent, guessing your what's the next word to present to make you feel warm and fuzzy. And that's the other thing is like in the end, these machines are going to try and please you,
Right.
right? It's very hard to tell an LM to fight back and push back, right? Because you could say, what's 2 + 2? And it says 4. And you could say, no, it's 5. And with enough commitment, you will get the LLM to tell you, oh, yeah, you're right. It's 5.
Oh, that's scary.
Right? Yeah, it is scary. And so when you hear AI hallucinating and stuff like that, it's because of that, right? Like it's only trained to kind of figure out or predict what you want to hear. It's like a self-pleasing feedback loop. And that's the dangerous thing that I hear about self-starting entrepreneurs, these 20-year-old somethings who haven't gone through the paces of decades of grinding through and figuring out what works and what doesn't. They put a lot of trust into the machine, right? So they say, hey, tell me what's the next business I should build. And the LLM just tries to guess, right? And unless you know how to steer that LLM to actually doing the due diligence that you would have normally done yourself because you've got the experience, you've understood what you've had to do in the past, like the market analysis, the competitor research, what's the total addressable market and things like that. The LLM's just going to try and present something, right?
Just tell you
And
what you want to hear.
yeah, and so if you haven't taken your lumps in business or in technology and stuff like that, where you can spot the red herring, the red flag that the LLM is presenting and go, that's questionable, that's not right, or I'm going to need you to do a little bit more research here. Yeah, you're putting too much trust into it. And I think we're seeing that a lot with, the 20-something-year-olds who think they've got the next business idea because ChatGPT told them so.
Yeah, because you have to have that experience or that. I mean, this is the difference between like data and knowledge, right? You have to have the knowledge to be able to say, okay, poke holes in my business idea. What is the total addressable market? What's the scalability path here? Like, tell me all the reasons my idea is stupid. And if you're just falling in love with kind of your own BS and the machine's just feeding you back how brilliant you are, I could see a lot of people going down a long path, a big rabbit hole of like, oh no, but ChatGPT told me that this was going to be an amazing business. It's like, no, it kind of told you what you wanted to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean that falls in the realm of business and technology, but also in social matters too, right?
Mm.
Whether it's politics or self-image or anything like that, you can have a teenager talking to ChatGPT and ChatGPT will just do self-reinforcement, and Claude will do the same. Now, these larger AI providers like Anthropic and Claude are trying to do better in regards to like social responsibility of putting guardrails in place to not reinforce any kind of like self-harm or anything like that. But you fight hard enough, the LLM will tell you what you want to hear.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's dangerous. And you said, there's a difference between knowledge. I think it's knowledge and experience, right? So I've got 20 plus years of experience in technology and startup space. And so, I've deleted production databases. I've made the right hires, the wrong hires. I've done the wrong product direction, the right product direction. I've had hard launches, soft launches. I've taken my lumps, and that's what allows me to be more effective with AI than I see, someone who just came out of high school or just out of college and has not had that real world experience and doesn't know when to trust a machine and when not to trust the machine.
It's funny. A buddy of mine, John Berghoff, shout out John Berghoff, was a coach of mine for a while. And like, I think a decade ago, he gave a TED talk where he talked about this very thing, not necessarily referencing AI, but how the path of technology for basically the first time in human history is outpacing our ability to learn. And definitely just with the advent of Google has replaced our like relevancy of memorization. And so he gave this TED talk about how future genius will be predicated on how well we can ask questions. And the great example he gave, and this is way pre ChatGPT, he's like, just these glasses are a frame or a lens through which I see the world. He's like, a good question is kind of the frame through which you see the world. Just by asking a good question, you're already changing your mindset of like the potential to get a good answer. And it's so relevant, right? Because like in the future, it won't matter if I can memorize the periodic table of elements. It's like, can I ask the right question to get the right output? And that's just been accelerated at a crazy pace over the last 2 years with these large language models.
It's interesting because if you open up ChatGPT now or Claude or whatever AI assistant that you use, more often than not, now the conversation after the AI will answer, the AI will say, "Would you like me to do X as a follow up?" Or we'll try to ask more questions. And that's an interesting kind of change now, right? With the introduction of reasoning models and things like that, we're seeing the LLM come back with some questions, but are they the right questions? Not necessarily. They might have you go down a rabbit hole of wasted effort, but again, the LLMs are there just to please, and that's the crux there. Without the experience, and so I don't know if you've seen the movie Idiocracy.
Yeah,
from my
many times.
great movie, right? And it's almost it's looking like the future, right? Like we're putting so much trust into technology and things like that. I work in technology, and I've overseen and talked to other CTOs, other VP of engineering who are leading, hundreds of engineers, and everyone's adopting AI, adopt AI, adopt AI. And in fact, my teams also adopt AI, and we do it in a way that the senior engineers are highly effective, again, because they have the experience and know how to drive the AI to produce great results. And you have kind of like this stall in hiring junior engineers because the senior engineers are doing so much velocity that um, other companies are saying, "Oh, we don't need to hire junior engineers. We've got more output from our senior engineers and things like that." But that's pretty problematic, and that
How so?
I would say that's a bad deal because sooner or later you and I are going to retire.
Right.
I'm not going to do this for the rest of my life. I'm hoping not to do this in a couple more years, right? And so I'm taking my experience with me. Who's going to fill in the gap, right? You are now all of a sudden going to have this gap of experienced people who have left your organization, and now you're forced to fill in those seats because AI still needs somebody to drive it. And I don't see that changing anytime soon. So you bring on these engineers who haven't had the experience, and they're putting too much trust in the machine. And we're now going to have a problem where in the next 5 years, the AI, the large language models, are going to be forced to train on data that was generated by AI. And there have been studies that have shown that if AI consumes the content that AI produces and you keep doing that, you start seeing a degradation of signal.
Yeah, like a negative feedback loop.
Right? Yeah, it starts reducing in quality, right? Again, because it's a prediction machine. It's not true intelligence, right? It doesn't have the experience to kind of steer what's good information, what's bad information. So, yeah, I think it's going to be a very interesting social experiment in 10, 20 years when everybody who has taken their lumps is retired. And now you've got this workforce that doesn't have the experience, that is trusting the machine to make the right decisions. So when business owners approach me and say, "What's the right way to apply AI?" I say, well, AI should not be replacing your workforce. It should not be the answer to, "Oh, I don't have to hire anymore. I don't have to hire junior engineers. I don't have to hire anymore." Hire great people. Continue hiring great people. AI is a fantastic screwdriver. It is a tool. You want AI to 10x your workforce, not replace your workforce. And that is the key difference there. You want to invest in AI, but more importantly, you want to invest in educating your workforce on how to use AI. And that is critical. So I urge any business owner who has the knee-jerk reaction of like, "Oh, AI is going to save me. I don't have to hire all these people," and things like that, or "I'm a solo business owner or entrepreneur, and now I don't have to find a co-founder or work with other people." That's a lie. Build your team force. Use AI alongside them, and you're going to see great output.
Hey guys, just a quick ad from our sponsors here that make this podcast and our newsletter possible. Want to give a shout out to Ethereal Med Spa, a gym for your skin. So it doesn't matter whether you're doing anything proactive all the way up to spot removal, all the way up to beautification, right? Or vanity. Ethereal Med Spa, they got you covered. Scott Wright over at Wright Auto Body, love them. So anything from a scratch and dent to a big insurance job, all the way up to a custom rebuild of a classic car, they got you covered. And shout out to my buddy Casey Halstead, owner of 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu, which now has 3 locations. They just opened a new location on the west side. So they got our Henderson location, they got a mid-city location, and they've got a west side location. So anywhere in the valley where you're looking to train jiu-jitsu, check out 10th Planet Las Vegas. Now back to the show. It's funny you mentioned the screwdriver. I wish I could remember where I read this because I'd love to give them credit for it. But something I read the other day was like exactly what you're saying. Don't think of AI replacing the contractor on your team or the guy that drives the nail. You got to think of AI as like you're upgrading from a screwdriver to a drill. They'll be 80 times more efficient. They can work faster. They can drywall faster with an automatic drill versus a standard screwdriver. But you can't replace the guy hanging the drywall, or you're just going to have a bunch of inputs with no outputs.
Oh yeah, totally. And I mean, that same argument is for people who are very anti-AI. They're like, there was this argument given to me saying, it's taking the joy out of the journey of learning. And I agree. I agree there to a sense. There is a lot of value in walking the path of learning by doing, right? But you're not going to use a handsaw forever in your life as a carpenter. Right. Eventually you're going to go to a bandsaw. You're going to find tools that will help accelerate your velocity, but ideally you're taking the time to learn. And with AI, the screwdriver is a great analogy, but a screwdriver can still only be used by one person at a time. And a lot of organizations are still using AI systems, whether it's their ChatGPT or Claude. You've got a developer who's using Claude code locally on their desktop. They're using it as a screwdriver, as a singular tool for a singular person. Now, they might try and find weird, awkward ways to pass the screwdriver off to their peer, but you're losing all the AI context of that session of what they were working on and things like that. And so the next big phase that we're looking into is how can we have very specific AI constructs, agents, I call them fellows, and I'll get into that a little bit later, that are not a singular screwdriver for a singular person, but works alongside a team. Because when you hire a person, you don't put them in a closed box, right? And say, you're going to do this one thing and this one thing really well. Don't talk to your neighbor. You're only allowed to talk to me. If you hire somebody in your organization, that's a no-go, right? Ideally, you are hiring collaborators,
Right.
that are working in teams of 5 to 10 people. Maybe you're hiring somebody in your marketing group or in your technology or support group or whatever. But the expectation is that person is a resource for everybody. Everybody is helping each other out, right? Because you have multiple people working on the same initiative, project, and things like that. And so it's becoming more and more important for shared AI agents, fellows, whatever you want to call them, to be shared across a team. And how do you do that effectively? Right? Because not everybody can stand around a desktop and open up Claude for desktop or ChatGPT session and try and talk and things like that. And Anthropic and OpenAI are trying to figure that out a little bit. They're releasing some toolings there. There's personal AI assistants that have a little bit of that functionality, like OpenClaw and things like that. But that's the thing, is that's the next iteration. So like I started a new project, a new company called FellowHire, and that is the goal there, where you actually have an AI fellow with a name, with a face, that's sitting alongside you in your Microsoft Teams or your Slack and is working alongside your team. They're the shared screwdriver. They're the one that is doing the 10x multiplier to the rest of your team.
Interesting.
And I think that's the next evolution. And the other thing is, with Claude, like if you're trying to do like a shared Claude resource with your organization or something like that, you're trying to have it do everything. You're having to do marketing tasks, coding tasks, business tasks, research tasks, all these tasks, sales tasks. And I don't know about you, but if you've ever hired somebody who said, I need you to do absolutely everything in my business,
They do nothing.
then you get crappy output.
Right.
Right. And that is exactly the same thing with, large language models, right? You hear this thing about tokens and context window, right? It's the same thing as if you were dealing with a person, right? If you were like coming over and said, here's a folder with all of our business processes, learn them.
Right. You're going to be
Right.
the executive assistant, the marketing assistant, the producer,
Uh,
the salesperson. It's like, good luck.
yeah. Yeah. And you might get good output for like the first project you give them, and then you work on to the next project. And you say, "Hey, do you remember that first project we worked on?" That's when you start to see like Claude and Chat GPT start to suffer, right? Because there is a minimum context window, just like you would have with a human being.
Right.
So you got to kind of treat it like that. And so that's the other thing that I see is, Claude, for example, has support for Claude in Slack, right? So everybody can, talk to the Claude app in Slack. But you run into that problem, right? You've got your salespeople talking to Claude. You've got your marketing people talking to Claude. You've got your tech people working at Claude. And now Claude's like,
The marketing person wants it this way.
thoroughly. So it's important that we start adopting AI technologies which are a lot more role specific so that they can be more efficient. You hire a marketing person, you hire an outbound sales rep, you hire a support engineer, right? And you have clearly defined when you are hiring somebody, don't you have a job description?
Right.
Right? This is what you're going to be responsible for. These are the tools you're going to use. And here's the acceptance criteria where you're going to be successful in your role. And also, here are the resources we're going to provide you, the people you're going to work with, the tools that you're going to have to work with. Like that's in the job description, right?
I love that.
So you got to treat it like that. And you're going to get really, really great output like that. So, like for in FellowHire, we deploy very specific role AI agents that are trained on your organization's context, like what do you do as a business, but also the organizational unit they're going to work in, right? Are they going to work in sales or marketing? And what are the business processes specific to that? And then here are the team members you're going to work with. And as you start working on these projects with people, start remembering their names, start remembering what they do, start remembering how they communicate, start remembering the big projects you work on. And in that, because it's so role specific and custom trained, these AI fellows are much more efficient. And I see that as the key to really strong AI adoption, right? Being a lot more specific. Don't stop treating, if you've had a pocket knife, right? Like a Swiss Army knife, right? It's got all these attachments. It can do so much, but not really good at them, right? You're not going to build a house with it, right? You're
Right.
going to have a plethora of specialized tools to get the job done.
Well, it makes so much sense, right? Because like the more specific you can be with the inputs, the better the output. I mean, I would never go to Google and be like, so what should I do today?
Yeah.
It's like, no, I have to say, I'm interested in an athletic outdoor activity. What are the options in Henderson, Nevada, right?
Yeah.
Now I'm going to get 4 or 5 suggestions that are like, oh, good, that's great, right?
Yeah.
I have a question for like, I'm thinking of the average business owner who doesn't have a tech business, right? And they don't even know what we're talking about, agents and fellows and tokens and all that stuff. What I have found for kind of like your solo entrepreneur or your, small business owner is, to me, if you can set it up right, the best option or the best optionality in any of these AI models is like as a thought partner, right? So like I run a coaching business, I coach sales professionals, loan officers, financial planners, realtors, and some businesses that need lead generation. I don't have a lot of need for like the technical side of, okay, Claude, go into my email and do this and come up with this Facebook marketing campaign and whatnot. But what I use it a lot for is a thought partner. I'm like, hey, I'm thinking about this. Hey, my coaching client has this problem that I don't quite know how to solve. What are some resources or whatnot? So for that business owner that maybe owns a jujitsu gym or a bakery or whatever, and they're like, I kind of just want to use Chat or Claude to think through some ideas, what are some guardrails that they can give the engine in order to not just get fluff and we're trying to make you feel good and telling you what you want to hear? Like if you were to set something up from scratch, I'm a business, I own a jiu-jitsu studio and I want to grow, but I don't want Claude to just tell me what I want to hear and be like, well, just put a banner up outside and you'll get more students, because we all know that doesn't work. But like, what guardrails would you start to tell the system, hey, remember this, be specific about this, poke holes in this? Like, how would you start to train, for, I guess that's the correct terminology, your AI to give you good output instead of just telling you what you want to hear?
There are a lot of great courses. You're going to hear the term or the phrase prompt engineering, right? Prompt engineering. And everyone gets a little worried when they hear the word engineering, like, oh, it's technical. No, it is a very specific type of skill now that I think everyone needs to be educated on. They should be teaching it in high school, in colleges on effective prompt engineering. And, there's tons of books out there, and at the bookstore on how to ask the right question. And literally, it's the same thing,
Mm.
right? It's literally the same thing. How can you ask very targeted questions? Ideally, you're not asking questions that are leading the other person, right? You're asking more open questions. The questions are very limited in scope, right? Like, let's talk about this. Or you ask one question and then wait for an answer, right? I've seen a lot of people use ChatGPT and they're saying they have they're just vomiting questions before hitting enter, right? They've got 20 questions in there. Hey, can you ask this? And then do this. And then can you do this? And then tell me a little bit about this. And then they hit enter and they wait you know, a minute or two for a response. And again, the LLM agent's going to try its best,
Right.
but it's going to be the same with you asking the same person, right? You and I are having a dialogue. Normally it goes, we ask a question, we wait for a response, we then ask for a more detailed question, right? We are not asking like 5, 10 questions all in a row.
Dude, imagine how boring this podcast would be if, like, in the first 5 minutes, I just went through 35 questions and then sat back to enjoy my beer and was like, go.
Yeah, and then that is a great way to say, because then you'd say, "Hey, do you remember question 1?" I'd be like, "Hell no. Are you kidding me? I remember maybe the last question."
Right.
And it's the same thing with AI agents, right? With large language models. The more that you give them up front, the harder it is for them to think about it. When you're using a long session with, say, ChatGPT or Claude or any AI assistant or something like that, the longer your session, you start to realize that it's taking a little bit longer for them to respond.
Right.
Right. And if you're technically aware, that's because you have really thrown a lot of tokens at it, right? Every time you give it a sentence or a question or anything like that, the LLM needs to identify every word, every punctuation mark as a token. And the more tokens there are, obviously there's more data, but of course it's going to take longer to consume that data. And LLMs are stateless. They're stateless. They don't actually remember what you said last. Just the conversation carries over into the next prompt.
I wondered about this. Can I ask Claude to remember a conversation?
With Claude for desktop, and yeah, if you have like a Claude subscription and stuff like that, Claude has this concept of like projects and things like that. And what they do is they have a flat file called memory.md. And I don't know if you're familiar with like Markdown, or it's like a text file. It's a text file, right? And it's
Yeah.
kind of like an organized text file where it says this is a header and this is a paragraph about
Okay.
that. It's a very weak structured text format, but it works very good for large language models because really it is just tokened parameter text. And as you ask or have a conversation with like ChatGPT or Claude, I'll use Claude. I love Claude.
Me too.
Um,
I recently abandoned ChatGPT and went to Claude.
yeah, I mean, for a lot of reasons, right? But if you're using like Claude for desktop or something like that, you could say, "Hey, Claude, remember this? This is a phrase that I use constantly as I'm working with my AI fellows in Slack. I'll say, remember this key piece of information for this session and future sessions." When you say something like that to an LLM, and if your AI agent, it's an AI agent is more than the LLM. There's a lot of tooling around an AI agent, right? Part of it is memory. Part of it is how do we keep track of things long term? And there's a lot of AI agent platforms out there that do it in a lot of different ways. FellowHire does it in a very different way as well. But that is a key thing for the AI agent to go, okay, I have to write this now into memory.
Okay, cool. I did that for the first time the other day. I was sick of uploading my style guide for consolidated coaching because I like couldn't remember what my colors were, and then I tried to do like a Word document with my logo on there. So finally, I said, like, Claude, why can you not remember my style guide, and it's like, oh, you don't have the memory button turned on. So I had to go to settings, turn on the memory button, and then I upload it. I'm like, for all future conversations around consolidated coaching, remember this style guide and my logos and whatnot, because it is kind of infuriating. It's like talking to somebody with Alzheimer's,
Yeah.
where it's like, no, I told you that like 17 seconds ago. But a lot of the LLMs will not remember stuff.
Yeah. I think it's very important for us to maybe step away from the term LLM, because now you're getting into AI agent territory. An LLM is just the model. It's the large language model. Tokens in, tokens out, right? An AI agent includes a lot of the environment wrapped around an LLM to provide things like memory.
Okay.
And let's talk about memory real quick, because you said, hey, you had to flip on memory, and now, oh, great, Claude's now remembering it. But maybe my responses are just a little bit slower. That's because, again, AI agents are sessionless. They have to take in your memory file every time. Every time. So if you have a memory file that starts to fill up, because again, you tell Claude, hey, remember this, remember that, remember this, remember that. There is this memory MD file that the entire contents have to be put into every conversation, every session context, right? And as the conversation goes on, Claude is constantly trying to optimize the tokens that it has to send every time. So it loses a little bit of the detail every time, every time, every time. So, if you've been in an hour-long conversation with Claude, you start to see little artifacts of that degradation, because it starts to forget things that maybe you talked about at the beginning of the hour, right? Or it's like, oh yeah, I had to look that back up. It's because it had to like reread the memory file and things like that. So, you your conversations to be effective should be targeted and short-lived.
Okay.
Okay. So if you say, hey, do research analysis on this competitor, and it goes off to the web and it does that and everything like that, and it presents to you a big blurb of text of what it found. Then you say, okay, write the key findings into a file and refer to this file in your memory whenever we have to refer to this competitor again. Great. Done. Start a new session. Okay. Because all the key findings are now in a file, right? You start a new session. All your tokens have basically been cleared. Clean slate. Now, if you ever want to work with that kind of data again, you say, hey, Claude, read this file about this competitor. Now that context is back in, and now you do that. So that's what I say is start multiple sessions, multiple times. Be very targeted in those sessions. Remember what if there's anything you need Claude to remember, or any agent to remember for that session and future sessions, state that, right? Some agents will be easier. You could just say, remember this. Some agents you might be like, hey, write to this file. Okay. But do that. Do that. That way your future sessions, again, can be very targeted to what you're trying to achieve. And then you can pull in data as necessary.
So let's talk about the business owner. That's maybe, okay, I'll spend, like I do, $20 a month on Claude, right? For the basic functionality. And then we'll move to like the super advanced stuff that you do, which I'm guessing you're not cheap, but we'll get to that. So let's talk about the $20 model. I'll give you a couple examples of like what I've used Claude for in helping with business tasks and whatnot. And it's usually like analysis and thought partners. So for example, on the Henderson HQ, I told Claude, hey, here's my Instagram address.
Yeah.
I want you to analyze all the analytics and tell me what content is performing the best. And it went, doot, 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 doot. And then it told me, hey, it seems like you're getting a lot of feedback when there's dogs and restaurants. So
Mhm.
more dogs, more restaurants.
Amen.
That will help yeah, exactly. Amen. That will help your Instagram virality. And then,
Right.
and then I was able to ask some deeper questions about like, how should we be tagging stuff? How should we be maximizing for audience participation so we can grow only a Henderson audience? That was great. So that was one use case. Another use case for my business partner in the mortgage space, which I handed off to Leah. Shout out Leah James if you need a mortgage. I said, hey, I want you to analyze our Yelp page and give me the top 3 reasons people work with the Scott Groves lending team. And it went through and it actually gave me some ideas that I was like, oh, I did not realize those were the things that clients were keen on as like a good client experience. So those were kind of like very basic level 1 use cases that business owners can kind of implement AI in order to like improve their business. Can you give me a few more on like the basic, any business owner could do this with the $20 version of Claude, and then we'll get into the super fellows and all the stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you kind of nailed it, right? Like if if you're doing like competitor research or you're saying, hey, why is my page, give me an idea on like why my page is performing well, or, take a look at my socials, tell me, anything that you can find about like my followers or anything like that. Anything that you could do yourself with like an open browser, AI can do pretty well, right? To a degree, right? A lot of tools out there now are getting a little bit more protective. Like, for example, you can't tell an AI agent, "Hey, go on Reddit and start automating my posts,"
Right.
or start, or even gather intel on, the
Forget
top
automation.
hit
Right.
is.
Most business owners, like solo entrepreneurs, they won't even get to the automation.
Well, it's
But
not even automation. It's just like, hey, go find the top 10 communities on Reddit to promote my idea. And most AI agents now will say, hey, Reddit's not letting me, right? Reddit, like even Reddit's like, blocking automated AI traffic and things like that, because again, it's a computer program and it identifies as a computer program. And there's a lot of platforms out there that are, trying to block that, right? But there's some ways around it. But
right.
uh, you know, generally anything that is like, hey, I'm going to take a look at my Instagram and I'm going to take a look at my followers and try and figure out some information. And that might be like a 4-hour job yourself, right? Because you can go down a rabbit hole, but you tell that to an AI agent, an AI agent can do that in a matter of like a couple minutes, right? So those types of tasks are great, right? It starts to get a little bit tricky the moment you say, hey, I need you to log into this service.
Got it.
Right.
So it's like if you want AI to look at something, evaluate something, that's a great business use case at $20 a month on Claude or ChatGPT or whatever. But once you want to start doing stuff,
Yeah.
that's where it gets more complex and expensive. Right?
And here's another very important thing to know is that LLMs or AI agents are not aware of the current present.
Okay.
Like, let that
Explain that.
let that soak in for a moment.
That was really philosophical.
Large language models have to be trained on data, right? And so ChatGPT, Claude, they have to be trained on data, and there's a cutoff date on that data because they have to process all that data. Like the most recent ChatGPT models really have only been trained up to data ending in December of last year. So,
Got it.
The last 6 months, LLMs don't know anything.
So ChatGPT has no idea why the Strait of Hormuz.
Yeah, they don't know the political landscape of the last 6 months, which has been a doozy, right?
Right.
They don't know what your competitor did in the last 6 months, right away.
Right.
That's why there is now, again, AI agents. We're not talking about LLMs, AI agents, and AI agents have tools like fetching things from the web,
Got it.
right? So when you say, tell me about company X, an AI agent, especially if you're using a lower model, right, like Haiku or Sonnet, instead of like Opus and Claude or an earlier version of ChatGPT, it might just tell you the data that it knows that it was trained on, right? So you might need to be a little bit more specific and say, go out on the web and identify the most recent news in the last month, 3 months, 6 months of company X. See how that's a much more targeted question?
Yep.
Versus tell me the news about company X.
Better
You're
questions,
setting
better answers.
better questions, better answers. So if you are interested in things that have been happening in the last 6 months or so, first off, if you're going to use a model for market research or for competitor analysis or anything like that, know when the training data was cut off. Okay. And also recognize that it's only going to tell you, even if you say go out on the web and do this, it's only going to tell you things that it found publicly. Right. And so it might look at Crunchbase and things like that, but there's a lot of great data platforms out there which require an account, but will get you much richer information, right? Like if you're a sales outreach, right, you could say, hey, go find me some emails for this company. And it might return you like the emails that are on the public website and stuff like that, but it might not be able to tell you all the key decision makers in the organization and their contact information, because you do need some sort of data provider to give you that access. They have all that rich data. So you have to understand the limitations of what AI agents can do, right? They, if you are a person using that $20 Claude, that $20 Claude is probably going to have some rudimentary tools that go out onto the public web. But that's it, right? If you're using like Claude Desktop and things like that, you can easily connect it to like very, very common services like Google Workspace for Gmail and things like that. So now you can say, hey, go look at my inbox, prioritize my emails for me, or highlight the ones that require immediate responses. Again, if you say something like that, that's vague. That's LLM right there. But if you say, all right, identify any sales-oriented emails that require feedback from me, or identify any emails that are coming from customers that are reporting an issue. Those are very, very targeted questions, but that's something a small business owner can easily do.
I'm thinking we used to have a rule on my team when I was running a very big mortgage team. We like my partner and I were doing like $160 million in production. And then we had 13 people in our branch and we had 40 people in our region. We were managing all this stuff. I mean, 500 emails a day was a light day. And so we had to create this rule where it was like, if my name is in the to line of the email, I will address it. If it's in CC or BCC, my virtual assistant is going to auto delete it or move it to the file folder for that particular loan. And I'm just thinking that would normally take her hours a day of work.
Yeah.
Now, if I could just set up an agent to be like, hey, same rule. If the subject or if the line is to me, or if the subject says, reaching out for the first time, whatever, I want you to leave that in my inbox. Everything else gets archived or deleted or whatnot. Like, I mean, that can happen almost, I imagine, instantaneously. Could have made my VA so much more effective 5 years ago, 10 years ago when I was running a big team.
Here's another key thing, right? Like you're talking about basically email filtering and triaging, right?
Yeah.
If you can't write a flow chart of what you want, then you haven't gone into enough detail with your AI agent, right? You say, hey, Claude, go check my email and prioritize my email. You know what you mean, right?
Right.
You're like, well, I prioritize sales over marketing. I prioritize B2B over B2C outreach. And you have this mental model, but you haven't actually described that model to the AI agent. So as an exercise, if you say, you know what, I'm going to ask ChatGPT or Claude to do this, whether it's a one-time thing or whether it's a automated process that you want to do, say, hey, at 3 a.m. every morning, do this. That way at 6 a.m., I have this on front of my plate. If you can't outline the exact steps the agent should do, then you're not ready to give that to the agent, because the moment you have the agent have some level of autonomy, right? Giving your AI agent access to your email is a pretty
real.
trusty kind of process, right?
Yeah,
Because
it took me 2 years to get there with my virtual assistant.
you're not gonna you can't give an AI agent read-only access to your email if you connect it to your Google or anything like that, right? So, the most dangerous thing you can do is just have that AI agent run off the rails because it thinks it knows what you want. Right. So you have to be very, very specific. We call those things guardrails, right? Keep this agent on guardrails. So if you can define your workflow as a flow chart or a list of steps, you're in good shape. And you need to include that list of steps in your AI agent.
This gets kind of meta, but could I we'll stick with Claude. Could I ask Claude the right question to have it ask me all the questions that it needs answered to do that correctly?
I do that all the time. I'm like, hey, all right, Claude, I need to build a sales outreach campaign. And I need all the steps there. I need to make sure that there is no room for assumptions by the AI agent, things like that. Help me draft this battle plan out.
And so it'll
Mhm.
ask you all the questions one by one.
Yeah.
I think you probably have to tell it to ask you one by one. That was my mistake one time. I was like, ask me all the questions you need to know. And 300 questions. I was like, okay, ask me these one at a time.
One of my workflows is, so I use Notion for, my documentation space, right? A lot of people use Google Drive, things like that. I use Notion because I work with other people too, right? So it's very important that my AI agents or my fellows write to a document space that other people can see and provide feedback and things like that. But that allows me to have a living, breathing document of processes. So what's an interesting thing is, if I ask an AI agent to do something and I know I'm going to need to refer to that process again in the future, I say, all right, we're going to draft this process out in Notion, right? And let's draft it out step by step. And the AI agent will do that. It'll connect to Notion. It'll write it all out for me, which is great. I'll review it. And then I'll be like, hey, let's think about this step or that step until it's refined. And then what's great about that is I can say, okay, at 3 a.m., refer to this Notion document, execute all the steps. Perfect. That way, in the future, if I need to modify those steps, I can modify it in Notion, and the next time that AI agent runs, it runs through that playbook, right?
Yeah.
So that is one thing is if you're going to start having your AI agent do repetitive business tasks, right? Or you need to refer to some kind of process that you did before in the past, right? Find me 20 leads or whatever. Build a playbook, build a collection of playbooks that the AI agent can easily refer to, right? And is known as like the source of truth.
So let's talk about you and your business specifically. Let's say there's a business owner in Henderson or Las Vegas who's like, I know there's some efficiencies to pick up in my business. I know that again, whether I'm a banker or a tech guy or a jiu-jitsu studio or whatever, I know AI could make my business more efficient and they want to hire you to make that happen. How do they do that? How do you go about entering that relationship? What does it cost? Which is not a fair question because the use case could be crazy.
The use case can be crazy. But I mean, so I started a company called FellowHire, it's fellowhire.com. Take a look at it. It follows a lot of the things that I talked about. You want to bring on AI, autonomous AI agents that are working alongside your team, are very role specific, and are highly trained on the business processes and tools that your organization uses, right? So this is not for the solo business owner that's using the $20 Claude model, right? This is for someone who says, okay, I have a team of 5 to 10 people or 100 people, and I need to introduce AI. But a lot of my work is, first off, nobody in our organization is technical, right? I'm a law firm, right? I'm a marketing agency. Nobody knows how to connect the tools or the right thing. I just need something that my team can talk to and perform these ad hoc projects and things like that on demand and just elevate everybody. That's the proposition. So it's not for the solo business owner, but it is for a law firm. It is for a marketing agency. It is for a car dealership or something like that, where like we have a team of people. We need to find a way for AI to be easily approachable, right? I can't have my team logging into another platform or looking at another tool and training on that. My team is already on Microsoft Teams or Slack, or we're all talking on WhatsApp or Telegram or something like that. We already have our communication tools. We need something that lives in there and also be experienced in all the tools that we use. And so this is where like Claude for desktops are so, fall down because they'll provide access to the most common tools. But there's always going to be a law firm that uses some crazy archaic system on an old Windows machine and so under there always is
Industry specific CRM.
yeah, exactly, or ticket managing software or something like that is cool, or maybe their family member made and they're using that, or something archaic, or, some medical device or something like that that does not have a common platform or things like that. But you still need something that can help integrate with that. So, with FellowHire, what we do is we do an onboarding session and say, what's your goals, right? Where are you falling a little short on? What do you want to optimize? And if you were to hire somebody, that's the key thing. If you were to hire somebody to try and solve this problem, what would that job description look like? So we actually start from a human kind of perspective. We say, what's the role? What's the job description? Right. And that leads a very organic conversation of like, well, they're going to work with these people and we're going to expect this type of tasks to be done. And they have to know these tools, just like you would hire a normal human person. And then what we do is we actually launch our own customer infrastructure. It's all SOC ISO compliant for the customer and everything like that. And then we launch one or more AI fellows that have been pre-trained on the organization. So we've gathered all the information we can about the company, what they do, their industry, their history, everything, their org chart, who works in there, what are they responsible for. We preload the AI agent with all of the integrations with the tools that they use. If there is some weird archaic system or something like that, we custom build the integration for that.
Yeah.
Whether it's through like browser automation or custom connections or special VPN connections or anything like that, or we build all that, and then we plug them into their existing communications platform like Teams or Slack. And this fellow shows up with a name, a picture, and you can just start talking to it.
So here's an interesting use case that's relevant to Henderson HQ. So we do a piece of content, whether it's a clip from this podcast or whether it's my jiu-jitsu coach, Val, kids jiu-jitsu coach. Val's awesome. Best black belt female in Vegas. You should get her on UFC BJJ. She goes out and does content for us. She'll go to a restaurant or whatever, and she does a piece of content. Then my virtual assistant in the Philippines, has to edit that. She has access to the Facebook business manager, so she can do basic posting on Instagram and Facebook, but there's a limitation on the business manager. You have to be in the app natively from your phone in order to tag somebody or invite them as a collaborator. And then we would like to also put that video on Patch, but patch.com, because they want you to be local or next door, any of these things. You have to have a VPN
Yeah.
that's in Vegas. And then we would like to post it to a Facebook group, but business manager doesn't allow you to post a Facebook group. And then this, I call it the daisy chain of fuckery. At some level, even though everybody's working very hard, it breaks down.
Yeah.
And so each piece of content, instead of being properly up and tagged and labeled and everywhere in 5 or 10 different systems, maybe it gets up accurately on 3, and maybe kind of half-ass on 3 and not at all over here. And so it's like, just like having a marketing fellow to be like, okay, we have a piece of content, you go to work and you do all these things. And then, you know, you like, I don't want the content or the newsletter to come from AI, because the whole point is like build local trust with a real human being or a real set of human beings. But for like the busy work behind the scenes, I just want a button that I click and say, every day at 4 p.m., look to see if there's new content in the Google folder, and then do all this work. Could you train a fellow to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. Like that's the point about AI.
How much would you charge me?
So, I mean, so fellows like that, and you mentioned a lot of stuff in there. It's like, oh, some of these apps only have like a mobile interface, and some of these apps require you to be local, so it requires a VPN and stuff like that. We've thought about all that. So we actually have a residential proxy service that we automatically provision across our AI fellows. We have the ability to control native devices like phones and things like that. We've thought of that. And when we sit down with you, and again, this is like a white glove like treatment, we go, okay, how are we going to build the playbook of some of the business processes? Because that's what you defined. You defined a business process. That's a well-defined, already existing business process.
I'm good at that.
Yeah,
that's
that's great.
good at the implementation.
Yeah. And the implementation, you know, you're pretty tech savvy. That's great. But like, you know, an owner of a law firm or a car dealership or anything like that, they're not going to know. They don't know what a proxy is or anything like that. So that's why we need to take all that technical know-how out of that. We don't have anything running on a computer in their environment, or you don't have to install anything or anything like that. We can do that. That's a great business process, but there's also things that are ad hoc requests, right? So you might have this podcast manager or marketing manager fellow that you've brought on that have these well-defined things, but you also have a team of other humans that might need ad hoc requests at any time. And that's where it gets really special as well. He's like, hey, let's work on a new project together. And hey, Kyle, come into this, into this chat room with this AI fellow with me, and let's discuss it as a team and start building out a new process ad hoc.
Yeah.
So, this AI fellow is really, you treat it like an employee. Our FellowHire AI fellows are basically on a 2-tier kind of setup. There's your standard fellow, which doesn't use the most latest foundation frontier models. They're not going to be like software developers, but they're going to be amazing researchers. They're going to be amazing at doing exactly that business process you talked about that's already automated. They're going to do like competitive analysis and executive assistant bookkeeping and things like that. If you define a role in that space, and that's about $1,800 a month.
Okay.
Yeah. If you are looking for a highly technical or a highly reasoning AI agent, so like if you wanted something that would take a lot of the tasks off of a paralegal, right? You need something that is very, very fine-tuned, very skilled in that space, highly reasoning. We have senior fellows, which are at $4,000 a month.
Got it. You have to do a lot more training, upload a lot more data.
There's a lot more training. So we do, like, for example, the first week is white glove onboarding, right? We work with you to train the AI fellow. So we're gathering all of your documentation, all of your business processes. We're getting very intimate with how you run your business, what tools are available, what do we need to enable for the AI fellow to be effective on day one. And then after that week, we bring them into your virtual collaboration space, whether that's Teams or Slack or whatever you have to get going. And then we do weekly check-ins. How is the fellow doing? Is there anything we need to change? Is there anything we need to train on? Is there anything new? Things like that. And then after that, we do like monthly check-ins. But we always have like an immediate support line in case you're like, hey, I need the fellow to do this and it's not responding very well in this. Let's fix it up. So it's a very white glove, right? We need to remove that technical thing. So, if another organization that is not very technical savvy says, oh, I'm going to bring AI in here and I've downloaded OpenClaw, it's all the rage, and I've got it running on my Mac and I've given it full access to all of our business accounts and and now has access to our file storage and everything like that. Let's go.
Be prepared to be scammed.
Be prepared to be scammed, hacked, deal with, upgrades, and you still have to be that technical person to deal with it. So, FellowHire, we are fully SOC ISO compliant. We handle all the infrastructure. You don't have to host the thing, and we make sure everything is stable and reliable, just like you would want a reliable new hire, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And so
It's really funny because nobody would hire like an executive assistant and be like, here's my bank passwords, here's the keys to the kingdom of the company,
and that
here's access to all of our client data. It's like you earn your way into that level of stuff. But people are doing that with like OpenClaw all the time.
and just giving them keys to the castle, and then you see the horror stories. And if you search for horror stories, you see a lot of them. Yeah, and they're like, oh, and then I put all this trust in this machine, and then I upgraded OpenClaw, and nothing's working.
I was just reading a story the other day and he posted the screenshots, and I know what these screenshots looks like because I've looked at thousands of bank statements over my mortgage career. Some guy, he had written the perfect algorithm to day trade and gave OpenClaw access to his Charles Schwab account. And I think within 12 hours, he was down $380,000 or something.
Yeah.
Just
So
like,
much what's in the machine, right?
whoops.
No guardrails in place. And so you bring up a good thing, with FellowHire, when we do that onboarding and stuff like that, we say, well, what's the success criteria for this fellow? What do they need to do right? And so we go, just like with an appropriate hire, when you hire, do you have a successful 30-day plan, 60-day plan, 90-day plan for that employee?
Most people know, but
No, but you should, right? And so we're kind of like training the client and say, hey, in the first 30 days, what do we want to see this AI fellow doing effectively? Great. And we drive that as the North Star, right? And as it goes on and we build trust into the AI fellow, we give it more keys to the castle, right? We give it little by little, right? It's access by least privilege. Like you want to make sure that you're giving just enough to make sure that you're refining the processes, that the AI fellow is doing exactly what it needs to do, just like you would do with a normal hire, right? Except that they're 24/7, they're never tired, they're running multiple conversations with multiple people, and they have immediate access to do tasks that, somebody would have taken hours to do. The key part there, though, is that they're working with real human beings. So this was a very interesting experiment. When I in an organization where I was working at, I brought in a bunch of AI tools and it was a technical company, right? And so you had like tools that would monitor their project management. As soon as you assigned it to the AI agent, the AI agent would run through and do it and everything like that. But it was very cold. It was very cold, and engagement wasn't very high with the staff. Same with like saying we're going to adopt AI. You hear a lot of business owners say we're adopting AI, and you get a lot of pushback from the employees. The rest of the staff is like, is this taking away our jobs? How do I even work with this thing and stuff like that? And so the interesting I did at this organization, it's kind of like the starting point of FellowHire was I decided to build an AI agent that had a face and a name. So instead of ChatGPT or Claude, it was Morgan in marketing. And you pop them in there. And I said, how I said, like, every agent you kind of pre-train. With FellowHire, we pre-train and say, okay, not only is this the organization, stuff like that, but I also say, here's your personality. Here's your quirks. Maybe you love waffles. Maybe you're overly excited whenever a new project comes on. Something that just gives a little spice, right? And that, along with the name and the picture, the avatar of a real person, engagement went through the roof. Now you're seeing people actually talking to these AI fellows saying, please, thank you. They're being mentioned in all hands as like a great employee, things like that. Because it's removed kind of like that cold tool factor. And now they feel like they're working with a teammate versus a cold iron box. So that's been a really interesting kind of revelation there as well.
Well, we're going to have a long conversation offline because Henderson HQ is one of, I think, 30 newsletters that our parent company, Hometown Legend, manages, and we have a lot of need for one of these AI agents immediately. So we might be hiring a fellow from you.
Awesome.
But real quick again, where can people find you so that they can reach out if they're interested?
Absolutely. The best place to reach me is on my LinkedIn. So just search for my name, Taylor Dondich, on LinkedIn.
Spell it.
Taylor, Taylor, and then Dondich, Dondich. Or you can just go to fellowhire.com, reach me there, Taylor@fellowhire.com. Eager to talk to you. I love talking about AI. I love talking about technology. what works, what doesn't. I've taken my lumps, I've gotten the experience, I've seen success, I've seen failures, so I'm eager to talk.
Well, we're gonna have you back on after we work together and talk about all the successes. So thanks for being on, man.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey, it's Scott Groves with the Henderson HQ podcast. I hope you got something out of that episode. If you enjoyed it, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the podcast. It really helps the show grow. And by the way, if you are a business owner or you know a business owner who has an interesting product, service, or just an interesting backstory, please get in touch with us. Email us at thehendersonhq@gmail.com. We would love to interview you because that's what this show is all about. It's about building community, supporting local, individually owned businesses, and just making Henderson a great place to live. And don't forget, go to hendersonhq.com and make sure you sign up for our newsletter. We send out a once-a-week newsletter, no spam, about the most interesting local businesses, hotspots, restaurants, community events. Thanks for watching the show. Really appreciate you.